I hope you can hear me. And I don't know, let's see, what are we? It's not good. Okay, let's start this lecture. I'm not sure that I have all the controls under control, but this is lecture number 2, and we are beginning the lecture of the deconstruction of the nominal rate of interest. And the nominal rate of interest is the interest you read in interest rate you read in the paper, here on TV or radio or wherever. And it is, well, all interest rates are extremely low right now. And what we want to be able to do is to take any interest rate under the sun and explain why it is as high as it is or as low as it is, not higher, not lower, but just why the rate of interest, nominal rate of interest, is at the level it is at. And what we found out is that there are 5 components to the nominal rate of interest. It can be deconstructed into 5 component parts. And the theoretical question, what is interest, is answered by the first component of the 5. But let me list the 5 components for you. And by the way, everyone, you should go to the Baruch Blackboard and download handout number 1 on the deconstruction of the nominal rate of interest, and you will follow this lecture perfectly, I hope. So we have 5 components, and the first component is what I call pure interest. And then another one is the debtor's risk premium or a default premium. Then we have an inflationary or deflationary price premium. This is added on to the first 2 components, so that's the third component. And then we have a liquidity premium, which is very interesting to study, but really insignificant in adding to the height of the nominal rate of interest. And then we have to account for the monetary policy actions of the central bank. And in our particular case, in the US case, we're looking at the monetary policy actions of the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve is the US central bank. So the central bank can lower rates at will. They cannot keep them permanently, though, because new money is an element of change and will cause certain things that will kind of correct matters later on. So the nominal interest rate is made up of 5 components, and each one of them has an explanation. We might also talk about the real rate of interest and the natural rate of interest, and we will do so as we go along. You're probably familiar with the concept of the real rate of interest, and here you just take the nominal rate and adjust for inflation, inflationary expectations, I should say, and that will give you the so-called real rate. So tonight we just want to take a few minutes, 15 minutes, well, maybe 20, but we're just going to explain the first component, pure interest. Now, a pure interest has other names to it. For example, pure interest is sometimes called the originary rate of interest because the other components are lacking. The other 4 components are lacking when we explain interest. The very first rate of interest doesn't have those other 4 factors, and so we get the name originary interest. Um, some people also mean the risk-free rate of interest here. Uh, the risk-free rate of interest is a name that financial pundits give the interest rate, but it's people are usually ambiguous about what that is. But if we could define it, it would be pure interest. And then there's another name that I really like myself, in addition to the name of pure interest, the time preference rate of interest. And the rate of time preference actually determines this first component. It determines supply and demand. And we're at a little bit of a disadvantage because we don't have a classroom. And usually when I have 40, 50 students, I go into the classroom the first day. They don't know me from Adam, or at least most of them, students don't. And I say several things to them. I said, look, let's assume you all have surplus funds, a great deal of money on your person or in your checking account. And I come in and I say, would you make a loan to me of $1,000, 1-year loan? And I further assume that interest is unknown. There is no interest rate in this world that we're talking about. Would you lend me $1,000? And I further assume, unrealistically, of course, that God Almighty is right in back of me so that if I go to default, he will pick me up, but he also will pick the creditor up and ensure that no harm comes to the investment of the creditor. So you can't lose given this assumption. And then I'm going to assume no inflation and no deflation. So we don't have that. And well, we really don't, we'll just assume we don't have a central bank as well. So would you make a loan to your professor? And many people will say yes. And they reflect the argument, false argument that I give that you do so for the psychic income of helping an individual out and making life a little bit better, shall we say. But then most people will say, no, I'm not going to lend you the $1,000 because I can use the money myself. I have various needs and wants, and I'll take that money and apply it to those needs and wants. There you have it. What we see in individuals is this valuation of time preference. In other words, you and I have wired into us this valuation that we prefer present consumption to future consumption in all cases. Well, this is a static proposition. We're not allowing for other variables here. And in that sense, it's kind of unrealistic, but we'll pick those up when we relax our assumptions and allow a default premium, an inflationary price premium, liquidity premium, and account for the actions of the central bank. But right now, the decision not to grant a loan by the overwhelming majority of students in the class is based on the time preference. They prefer present consumption to future consumption and therefore will not lend to somebody else. And if they were to lend surplus funds to individuals, they would prefer future consumption to present consumption relative to those dollars that they lent out. So everybody, we are determined by this valuation of time preference. It's wired into our head. And so I know as a would-be borrower that in order to get you to lend me money, I'm going to have to reverse this valuation. I'm going to have to get you to prefer future consumption to present consumption. The wise old bird here is his mind is thinking, and he says to the students in the classroom, All right. Okay, you don't want to uh, lend out any surplus funds. You have your own wants and needs. Um, let's see if I can get you to reverse that valuation. I will pay you 1,000. What's 1% of 10% is 100? I will pay you $1,010 at the end of the year's time. And so I said, now how many of you will make the loan? And almost invariably, nobody sticks up their hand. Then I go ahead and increase the amount to $1,020, and hardly anybody raises their hand. Hardly anybody's willing to do it, at least of those who were going to do it in the first place. And then I keep increasing the amount I would pay in a year's time. I will pay you $1,030. Well, maybe we'll get one or two takers in the class. But I need, let's say the class is 50 people, I need 50,000, not 2,000 or 3,000. So I say to everybody, no matter what amount we settle on, everybody will be paid the higher amount. So then $1,004. And many people will say, well, I just want more. And so we get to maybe 6 or 7%. It seems like they're just going to hold out forever. So I say to them, well, you know what? I can stop this at any time I please. And you know, I may not get the funds for the loan, but you won't get the interest, not interest, but the amount you had want or had planned on. So I keep going, and maybe I get to 8%, 9%. So this is it. And I will pay you $1,090 in a year's time. Well, then we get a lot of people. So point is, in going through this example, and I guess it's better to see it in the classroom, everybody has their own rate of time preference, but the rates differ amongst people. So when we have a large group of people get together and there's a higgling process taking place, a negotiation process, everybody gets involved. The overwhelming majority of the people settle on one rate. And of course, this is an equilibrium rate of interest or based on time preference. And don't you see, we have our first interest rate, and it's you know, the interest rate arises from the fact that I've gotten a lot of people, by paying them interest, if you will, by paying them interest, I've gotten a lot of people to part with their surplus funds, and they prefer future consumption to present consumption. Why? Well, because I will pay 9% interest in a year's time. That's pretty good, even in today's world, by the way. But you get the idea. When a market is allowed to form and people get together and negotiate, higgle voluntarily now, they're going to come up with an equilibrium rate, and that equilibrium rate will be the pure rate of interest. You could call it the time preference rate of interest or originary interest. And I prefer pure rate of interest, that term. The other terms are kind of heavy. So a good estimate of the pure rate of interest is, surprise of all surprises, it's not the very extremely low rates we have today, but it runs from 4 to 4.25%. And I've arrived at that figure in a way that, well, I'm not going to tell you. Only students who really are interested in economics and interest theory in particular, I would tell them, but I want them to read the primary books on interest from some really great economists. We have Knut Wicksell, we have Irving Fisher, we have Ben Bovwork, and Frank Fetter, and a whole bunch of people. Very interesting reading. And the probably the major explanation of interest is the time preference rate. Now, this is a highbrow area of economics to study. People do differ. There are other theories. But this one seems to have more explanatory power. And everybody, a good estimate is 4 to 4.25%. Well, I'm not going to tell you how I arrived at that, but I will tell you this. If there is a constant in economics, it is this estimate of 4 to 4.25%. The rate of time preference, determined by the valuation of time preference, runs between 4 and 4.25%. And you know, I'm going to date myself. I'm ancient. I really am. But you know, when I was in college, well, not too long ago, of course, that estimate of pure interest was 4.25%. And people, you know, I estimated every year, pretty much every year, and it hasn't really changed, even though the theory of time preference allows for increasing income or wealth, and therefore the rate of time preference would decrease. But in actual practice, it hasn't changed. And if there's one thing more constant than the marginal propensity to consume, or well, you name one that's been around a long time. Well, this one has as well. This 4 to 4.25% is what economists want to explain, you know, why we have interest. All the rest is a response to the environment we find ourselves in. So I want to, I think, quit there tonight. I think I've taken about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit less. And what do I want to say? The nominal rate of interest principally is made up of the pure rate of interest in non-disequilibrium times, because the default premium or debtor's risk premium is not so great in those such good times. If you have very little inflation or no inflation, then there is no inflationary price premium. There can be a liquidity premium, but that's, by the way, a negative number. And it's a small number that you add in to the mix. So we're looking at a nominal rate of interest of at least 4.25%. And then again, you ask yourself, why are rates extremely low today? Let's take the 3-month Treasury bill. It's 3-month Treasury bill and the 6-month Treasury bill, which are used to change the money supply in the first transmission mechanism. You know, the 3-month Treasury bill rate is the most important of all the rates we have. It is the one that is adjusted to by everybody, including the LIBOR rates. And the federal funds rate is adjusted to it as well. The federal funds rate is, during the course of a day, it's very normal for one bank to be, say, short of required reserves, and they have to become compliant with the law overnight. So they go to a member bank of the Federal Reserve System that has surplus reserves and surplus funds, if you will, and they borrow, and the interest rate is called the federal funds rate. Now we're talking about minimal or a small amount of money that is involved in transactions involving the federal funds rate. But with the 3-month Treasury bill rate, we have a volume of transactions, and this is now becoming an old number, of a daily volume of $500 billion a day. That's $500 billion of transactions in 3-month Treasury bills. Now, when we're talking about the Fed, and if they have a project that, well, really it involves more money than the $500 trillion, sorry, $500 billion, then they will jump to the 6-month Treasury. So we have 3- and 6-month Treasuries are used to change the money supply. And again, just because of the volume of money involved in the various transactions, the 3-month rate is the most important interest rate of all interest rates. Now, you don't hear that today very much, but nevertheless, it's true. So, in our next lecture, we're going to explain the debtor's risk premium, and then in the one following that, the inflationary price premium, and then following that, the liquidity premium, and then we'll account for the actions of the monetary authorities. And then we'll fully define the so-called natural rate of interest given to us by economist Knut Wicksell. He was a Swedish economist at the beginning of the 20th century. And then we have the real rate of interest. And of course, we must talk about inflationary expectations as well. So this is our second lecture. And oh, by the way, I'm having trouble with, of all things, the Dropbox, the cloud at Baruch. I have not gotten that straightened out, but there is another way. So until I tell you otherwise, go to the Baruch Blackboard and you will see the lectures under course documents. Again, you will see the lectures under course documents. So it is about 8:30 in the evening of July 16th. So I wish you a good night's sleep, and look for lectures on the weekend. We're going to catch up with the time we lost, but hopefully you will enjoy it. So you need handout number 1, though, to follow this second lecture. And well, so be it. So, okay. So thank you very much. I shall end the lecture now, if I can find out where the controls are. And here we are.